Danielle is currently the acting president of the Australian Hypnotherapy Association, a clinical hypnotherapist, counsellor, and tutor running a successful private practice. She is also a highly experienced nurse and midwife, having spent 20 years working at the cutting edge of IVF in Australia. She is an international speaker on mind-body therapy and healing modalities. She is also the author of 2 best-selling books. She writes to educate and inspire her readers about human potential. Her first book, Sarah's Story, Life After IVF, highlights the infertility journey and, importantly, our ability to overcome adversity. Her talk is titled The Infertility Experience. I pass you over now to Danielle Aitken. Thank you.
Hi, Danielle. Hi, Danielle. You're muted. Your mic is muted, just to let you know.
There we go. Good. I've unmuted myself. That's a good start. Greetings, everybody from Melbourne, Australia. It's later in the day here than it is for most of you in UK. Now, I also just have to see if I can share my screen. There you go. I think that's right. So my talk is the infertility experience, creating resilience and improved outcomes, with the twist about COVID, of course, because one of the major issues in the infertility journey is stress. And as we're all aware, COVID has certainly added that to most of our lives. So I'm just seeing, oh, there we go, my screen's working. So the aims, I just want to provide some information and give some practical tools on how to best manage this client group. In order to do that, though, I need to give a bit of an understanding as to what the infertility journey, the normal infertility journey, is about. And I'll be giving some examples on some types of mind-body therapies that we can use, hypnosis, mindfulness, visualizations, that sort of thing, that can be very helpful in outcomes of improved outcomes for this client group. So currently, statistics of infertility in Australia are 1 in 6 couples, which is quite high, will experience some infertility issues. And in other countries with lower socioeconomic type status and greater poverty and health risks, the World Health Organization says probably 1 in 4 will need help or assistance. In order to, of course, understand, we need to define what infertility actually is. And it's defined as an inability to conceive after 12 months of unprotected and regular intercourse. So we've got the usual causes, which of course, we need to bear in mind as well, because there's 2 factors here. There's what we can do and what we really need other interventions for, surgical and or medical interventions. So the usual female causes, tubal, uterine, ovulation, the things that you would expect, endometriosis, ovarian failure for the women. And I've highlighted there autoimmune diseases, social trends and stress, because they're the things that we can do something about using the therapies that we can access, hypnotherapy and mindfulness, as I said, are 2 really great ones to use with this client group. But we need to also consider the impacts here of, in a normal situation, stress is a big factor. So we add COVID into the equation there, and obviously that multiplies the impact of stress, because there's the experiences that we've had in each individual country with the COVID situation has certainly added that to the lifestyle of many of us. So I'll talk a bit about that. The male infertility factors is the usual suspects, as you might expect: the abnormal sperm function or production, problems with sperm delivery, such as absence of vas deferens, where sometimes due to genetic diseases such as cystic fibrosis, that sort of thing, and environmental factors. But we also there have lifestyle issues and stresses as well. So again, things that we can actually do something about. So we add COVID into the list of usual factors, and we in Australia we're a bit behind the rest of the world as far as the COVID journey goes. So we're just coming out of the end of a substantial amount of lockdown and all the mandated restrictions that we've had. And I live in Victoria, and in Victoria we've certainly done it very, very hard. We haven't had the numbers that you've had in the European countries, but we've certainly had the restrictions. And I believe that Victoria, where I live, has had more lockdown days than anywhere else in the entire world. So, you know, the outcome of that on people's mental health has been significant. So on top of that, of course, economic uncertainty. We've had a lot of people out of work, with job losses. There's also, we have, as I'm sure in the rest of the world, had issues with vaccination, people wanting it and or not wanting it. So, and each of those options provides concern for some people. We have a situation in Victoria now where if you are not vaccinated, you basically can't do much at all. You can't work. You're shut out of social environments, shops, certain shops, restaurants, that sort of thing. So this all adds to the lived stress experience, which is going to have an impact on people's infertility. Anxiety, isolation, and depression of the COVID situation has also been pretty massive. And as I said, I'll talk about the Victorian experience. We've had so much time where we really haven't even been able to go more than 5 kilometres from our homes. So that leads to further isolation and family isolation as well as friends. So the number one cause that has been identified in people dropping out of fertility treatments is stress. So it's a pretty significantly stressful journey to begin with. And the usual stresses are financial, family, friends, relationships, where because of the infertility journey, it causes stress in relationships. And often I found in my work with IVF that some couples didn't survive the journey. So, and sometimes that was done for various reasons. Sometimes one couple would perceive the issue as theirs, and they would want the other person in the relationship to be able to have children. So many of the time people would say that they wanted to break up for that reason. So very stressful. So then, of course, with COVID in, we have unemployment, we've got post-lockdown anxiety, loss of social connections. As I said, family dynamics have changed, social dynamics have changed, and that separation that I mentioned from loved ones who can provide support. We also have the issue of uncertainty. We've had 18 months of it here, whereby for a good part of that time, many people haven't been in employment. And I guess the trend would be for a lot of couples to put off their fertility because of that reason. We'll get back on our feet and have a little bit more time, earn some money. But one of the factors as well is age that significantly impacts fertility, and it declines with age, which I will show you here. Just a little pictorial diagram there where you can just see clearly that women, this is with the IVF success, so we are talking in an infertile population. Women under 29 years have their best success rates for fertility, and it declines thereafter. So men's fertility also is influenced by age, which a lot of people aren't aware of, but it declines a little bit around 40, 45, leading to that reduction in sperm quality. So this is just another way of looking at those same figures, and you can see quite clearly there that those numbers drop off pretty rapidly when we're talking about getting up to around 40 or 44 years of age there. And in simple terms, if a woman is trying to conceive when she's under 30, she's going to have 4 times a higher chance of conception than she is when she's over 40. Okay, so why is stress such a factor? Well, stress is a factor because when we're in stress, it actually reduces fertility and many other functions as well. If you think about it, we're not supposed to live in stress. Stress is a wonderful function of the body, stress mode, fight-flight mode. but we're not supposed to live in it, and we as human beings can turn it on with our thoughts alone when there's no actual danger. So, but when we're living in a stressful situation constantly, then there's stress chemicals in the body that turn off certain functions. So the things that don't work so well in a stressful situation, fertility being number one, also digestion, immunity, which is an interesting one when we're talking about COVID. So there's a lot of fear naturally about will I get COVID, and all the restrictions as well. And so stress will actually be a predisposing factor to actually making it probably more likely that you might get sick. Clarity of thought, memory, some of the other functions that are impaired when people are living in stress. So generally the body's not going to reproduce in stress, but we're talking, again, I'm talking about the infertile population. In Australia, I think we've had a bit of a baby boom because we were all locked down, and 9 months later we're seeing some babies from all of that. But if we're talking about a predisposed infertile population, it's a bit of a different situation. So what happens when everybody's living in so much stress is that our brains actually we get used to living in stress mode, and we can actually wire the brain to be more stressed. And that obviously is something that, you know, we as therapists can consciously do something about with our clients when we recognise that. So just as an example, the Dormer Centre is a Centre for Mind Body Health in America, and they've done some significant studies, a large federally funded study in the US, and the outcome of a 10-week program of mind-body medicine, so we're talking about mindfulness and meditation and visualization, which is, you know, that's pretty much what we do with hypnotherapy, isn't it? We're getting people relaxed and we're getting them to use their minds in ways that they can future pace themselves or visualize what it is that they want. In this study, it showed that there was a 55% increase in a previously infertile population. 55% of women conceived within 6 months of the program, compared to only 20% in the control group. So that was a fairly significant study, and it just shows what's possible. So the benefits of mindfulness, you know, we're reducing the stress. We want them to focus on some of the processes such as breath work, which I'll talk a little bit about as I go on, and with a view to giving them a sense of control. So identifying the things that are putting them into stress, and often it can be what they're thinking. So identifying thoughts that are unhelpful and not focusing on unhelpful feelings as well. So just bringing it into awareness. Step one, I'll often say to my clients, step one is being aware, and as soon as you're aware, it puts you in the driver's seat because you then have a choice. So, you know, step one, what am I thinking that's making me feel this way and creating stress in my life? And the second step, really just challenging it in any way possible and asking, is this helpful? And if it's not, we want to use the breath, take a breath, bring the body back into a calm state. When we're in stress, we're really activating our sympathetic nervous system, which is, you know, stress mode. And what we want to do with the breath work is bring them out of stress, and we activate what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest mode. And when we do that consistently, we're beginning to bring the body out of stress and get them rewired for more relaxation and calm. So that's the awareness. Mindfulness is, we don't want them to be judging these thoughts. They're repetitive, often thoughts. The thoughts about the money, thoughts about will I be able to conceive, thoughts about is this COVID vaccine going to influence my fertility even further. We have people who are concerned both ways about, you know, getting the vaccine and how that might impact fertility, and not getting the vaccine for similar reasons. So basically what we want to do is we want them to take some control over that rumination and the thought process, and bring them back to the moment without the judgment of those repetitive thoughts. So because the in-breath is connected to sympathetic nervous system and the out-breath is more parasympathetic nervous system, we really want to create a system where they're going to connect more to that out breath. So that's generally with a ratio of 1 to 2 works quite well. Breathe into 1, breathe out to 2, or breathe into 4, breathe out to 8, that sort of thing. And there are many, many breath techniques available. Dr. Andrew Wheel he has popularized one of the breath techniques called 4-7-8, which is a yogic technique that's been around for a while. But it's really just, I always say to my clients, if they can just allow the exhalation to be twice as long. And the physiology of the body is also important. So if we can sort of bring the shoulders down with that exhalation, it really begins to talk the language the body understands, and the clients can fairly quickly get themselves out of stress mode when they practice this. And it's really just a matter of interrupting those constant patterns of thoughts that they're having, or feelings that they're focusing on. And what we're talking about really is neuroplasticity, rewiring of the brain, and this is something that we can do with awareness, and practicing mindfulness and self-hypnotic techniques can really help them with that process. They're being very aware of their thoughts, and so the thoughts that they want to hold on to and the thoughts that they no longer want to hold on to. So we get them to have a look at that and change those patterns. So I'll talk to my clients a bit about this, and particularly post-COVID, as I've said. I've had so many of my clients, as I'm sure many of you really have been very, very impacted by the COVID, and in a fertility setting, then that's not going to be helpful at all. So their thoughts are very important, and if they think a thought, the body has a way of releasing chemicals directly related to that thought. So, before they know it, they're feeling exactly the way that they were thinking. So if they're thinking those anxious thoughts, they're going to very soon be feeling anxious as well. If they're thinking the depressed thoughts post-COVID and being isolated, they're going to very quickly be starting to feel depressed as well. So what they're thinking, they're soon going to experience. So I give my clients homework, because obviously we're seeing them in session for an hour, perhaps in a week or maybe 2. So homework is essential, because what we want to do, if we're looking at rewiring and bringing them out of stress, we really want them to practice a lot. So the homework is very important, and following up on it is also very important, because if you give your clients something to do and we don't follow up on it, then we're not really enforcing to them that it is important. So they'll think that it's not important if we're not going to at least bother to follow up on it. Excuse me. So what we're doing here is we want to normalise the situation, let them know that they're not alone, that many people are experiencing what they're experiencing. It has been compounded by COVID. Many women go through this, and men as well. They're on their own journey. And there are things that we can do. So that's the important message. So with a problem solution type stage, and with any of our clients, obviously we want to know exactly what it is. Their solution is going to be different. So the solution state, goals, there's lots of different ways. It's all the same thing. What we really want to know is in complete absence of their problems. So we want to be identifying what their worries are and their concerns, and getting them to think about life when they don't exist. So what they actually want instead of what they don't want. So turning it around, how life will be. And then with hypnosis, we can use that in hypnosis, of course, but also I teach them self-hypnotic techniques so that they can start to really connect to that state more and more. And as they do, turning off the stress mode as well, as with all hypnotic techniques, and with visualizing and future pacing, we're getting them to sit more in that future state. And where the mind goes, the body often follows. So benefits of the homework is going to be, as I said, just allowing them to create more awareness and be in those solution states more and more, to identify when they're sitting in anxiety and to bring themselves out of it. So specific homework, breath work, very, very important. Mindful techniques, so teaching them about mindfulness and non-judgment. meditation, mindful body scans, positive visualization, self-hypnosis. So the longer the client stays in these states, and the more often, the more they're turning off their stress mode and more likely to lead to positive outcomes with their fertility journey. And as it just says there, fertility is one of those things, as I've already stated, that will turn off in stress in some situations in the infertile group. So in summary, what we want to do is we want to reduce their stress, connect them more to that parasympathetic nervous system, introduce those mindful techniques, and not put off seeking help, and or not put off their fertility for another year and another year if their age is getting up there, because age certainly matters, as I've said. And to also seek the right advice, because I have, you know, in the clinic often, I did see people who came in who had been given wrong advice, and time gets away, and time is one thing that is very precious in this group. Okay, and the main thing is, obviously, as with all our clients, we need to focus on the things that we can actually control, not the things out of our control. And I think that is it. I'm not sure how I'm going for time, but hopefully not too bad. I did write a book on it, so it identifies the journey. It just has some good information in it as to what the actual infertility journey is, and COVID compounds that significantly. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. I think that was really informative. And okay, I'm just going to look at some of the questions here. We've got a question from Manraj. So in your experience, is there any data or correlation between COVID vaccination and fertility?
That's a very interesting question, and I am not aware that there is, but there's a lot of concern from a lot of people. So I think the vaccine hasn't been around long enough for there to be any long-term data on these matters, but it is a concern for a lot of people who are trying to conceive. That's the dilemma, you know, because there is no long-term data. So do I have it? Do I not have it? Yeah.
So I suppose that this would also put sort of a break on many people's plans as well for infertility treatment, because of the lack of information that we have about COVID. So a lot of people may be putting that on hold as well.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, we've got another question here from Mei Tang. In fight and flight mode, a reduction in fertility is the same as a reduction in sexual libido. So, hold on.
Was that the question? Is it? Or it is that?
Oh, is it? The question is that the same in sexual libido too? So a reduction in fertility is the same as a reduction in sexual libido in fight and flight response.
Yeah. I'm going to extrapolate here because I haven't heard of that, but I would imagine that it would be, because if we're in fight-flight mode, all the non-essential functions really shut down. And if you're trying to get away from the perceived danger, I wouldn't expect that libido would be high on the list of things that were necessary. So I would think so, yeah.
Okay, a question from Richa. Could you share from your experience any specific hypnotherapeutic technique that has worked in most of the infertility cases with positive outcomes?
Yeah, sure. What I do is as you know, in hypnotherapy, you don't have to get your client to imagine exact the anatomy, if you like, as long as they have the right understanding of it. So they can imagine their fertility system however they like. But I would often, if I'm working with IVF clients, I would get them to imagine a lovely, nice uterine lining and an embryo implanting, and, you know, future pacing them to get their test results, that sort of thing. But very importantly, to really get them to sit in that out of stress mode, so a relaxed mode often, and do those visualizations of you know, implantation, or if it is if it is an IVF cycle, of follicle development and you know, fertilization, that sort of thing, and follow the process through.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what you can do. So I think, all right, so there's probably a last question for you from Christina. If the IVF was successful, but the mom had a miscarriage, could hypnosis help with that?
I'm not quite sure what the question means. If the mother has a miscarriage in subsequent pregnancies, is that what this is?
Probably to deal with that particular, that means the IVF was successful. So the hypnosis probably helped with the IVF, but the mom ended up having a miscarriage anyway. I think that's probably, yeah. Do you set them up for that? I mean, I suppose maybe what you're trying to ask is, do you set them up for a possibility of failure or any complications that may arise?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one because you don't want to set them up for failure, and if they are going through IVF, the success rates of IVF, you know, there's a high potential that they might not in the first cycle or in the second cycle get success. Yeah. So it is a tricky one because you don't want to set them up for that failure and that you know, lack of success. If it's like they try and protect themselves from the failure, so they don't want to get too positive. But ideally, if we can get them to trust and imagine what they want rather than focusing on what they're afraid of and what they don't want, generally better outcomes. I did have a client who had a very long history of a lot of failures, and she had gone through every kind. She'd even done donor egg and gone through every kind of treatment, even gone overseas to get donor egg. And it wasn't until she kind of surrendered and went, well, even though I'm going to probably be disappointed if it doesn't work, I'm going to give it my all and really focus on what I want. And she actually did get pregnant. So that was a wonderful outcome.
Thank you, Danielle. I think it's really important, a very interesting subject, something that I also have personal experience with, and I can vouch for that. It's something that really is very beneficial. And with that, I think we'd like to thank you, Danielle. And the same goes to participants. You can leave any questions for Danielle, which we will revert to you via email. Thank you so much, Danielle.